Hey everyone, this is Pallavi and today I'm going to show the 25th game of the book Chess, The Art of Logical Thinking by Neil MacDonald. This game was played between Shirov and Ivanchuk in 1992 Manila Olympiad and the opening played was Dutch defense. This game underscores the importance of controlling key files, effective piece coordination, maintaining a strong pawn structure and avoiding strategic errors. So without further ado, let's begin. So I'd started with d4, occupying the center, controlling the c5 and d5 square, making way for the queen and the bishop. Black played e6. Ivanchuk is making his opponent unsure. No matter what shape the black center ends up being, this small pawn move will help build it. c4. White stays in queen's pawn territory by declining the offer to enter the French defense with e4 and then d5. Now d5 gives us the queen's gambit. Alternatively, if knight f6 could lead to the Nimzo Indian after knight c3 and bishop to b4. Now black played f5. Black chooses to play the Dutch defense. It's good because it controls the e4 square without risking immediate pawn attacks like d5 would. Also, it lets black think about using the f-pawn for a kingside attack, but it weakens the black's kingside pawns and doesn't directly help move his pieces. Now white played g3. A kingside fianchetto is a good move against the Dutch defense. Defensively, the bishop on g2 guards the king well, protecting him from danger. Also, the pawn on g3 blocks potential attacks using the f5 to f4. Now black played f6, developing towards the center and controlling the e4 square. Bishop g2. Here the bishop not only helps to push forward in the center with e2 to e4, but also creates pressure on b7, making it difficult for black to develop their queen's bishop. This is because black's bishop is already restricted by its own pawns on e6 and f5 and would prefer to enter the game through b7 after playing b6. Now black played c6. Ivanchuk plans to develop his queen's bishop by placing a pawn on d5. This move stops the pressure from the white bishop along the diagonal and allows for b7 to b6 followed by bishop b7. Also, playing d7 to d5 makes it tougher for white to play e2 to e4. However, instead of committing to this plan immediately, he uses a clever move order tactic. Currently, the black pawn on c6 indirectly supports the idea of playing d5. If black played d5 right now instead of c6 immediately, white could respond with knight h3, preparing to place the knight on f4. So Ivanchuk waits a move before playing d5. Now white played knight f3. Until white moves his knight to f3, if white plays knight h3 instead, black can still change his plan to d6. If this move makes the f4 square less appealing for the white knight because black can push the pawn to e5, forcing the white knight to retreat and leaving it awkwardly placed on h3. So now black played d5. Now black has a strong group of pawns on light squares and is ready to develop the queen's bishop. However, in the opening, every advantage for black comes with a cost. Until now, white hasn't made any mistakes. The drawback of black's focus on light squares is that he has ignored the dark squares particularly f4 and e5. e5 is now vulnerable since there is no pawn protecting it. So black must be cautious not to let white control these squares. White played kingside castle, king safety. If white plays d takes c4 now, black plays d takes c4 now, then knight e5, regaining the pawn immediately, because if black goes b5, then knight takes c6 with the support of the g2 bishop. So after white castled, then black played bishop to d6, developing and guarding the weak e5 square. Now white played b3. He prepares bishop to a3, a good move, when the exchange of bishops will deprive the square of its best defender. Queen e7, a good move by black. Unlucky for white, the queen settles in the heart of the black position, where she blocks white's possibility of playing bishop to a3, can support an e6 e5 push if it benefits black to open up the center, moves away from the first rank, clearing the path for the eventual development of the queen's rook. So after queen e7, white played knight e5. White keeps trying to get the most out of the hole on e5. Knight is happy to be on a central square where it can't be attacked by a pawn. Now black castled on the king side. King safety plus the rook on f8 is now well placed to support the action in the center. Knight d2. Logical move. The other white knight quickly moves to f3 to support the knight on e5. This shows why it was smart for white to keep their options open with the knight's deployment. It could have been too easy to just develop the knight to its usual c3 square a few moves ago. Now black played knight b d7. Here it joins the king's bishop in the fight for e5. Knight d f3. As planned, white moved the knight to f3, supporting the e5 knight. Now black played knight e4. Black wants to complete his development by putting the queen's bishop on b7, but if he plays b6, then knight takes c6. And then black loses a pawn. And if here, instead of knight e4, had black captured the knight on e5, then d takes e5, it's a fork. And if bishop takes e5, giving up the dark squared bishop leaves black uncomfortable after d takes e5, and the knight can go to e4. Therefore, Ivanchuk first of all moves the knight from f6 so that he can initiate an exchange with knight takes e5 without falling into a fork. So after knight e4 here, in terms of pawn structure, the e4 square isn't as good for the black knight as e5. As e5 is for the white knight. White can push the black knight back with f2 to f3, but black can't push a pawn from f5 to f6 because pawns can only move forward. However, advancing f2 to f3 will weaken white's pawn structure. In the meantime, black knight is happy on a good central square. After knight e4, white played knight d3. The knight moves back willingly to let the other knight go to e5. This also clears the path for white to start moving his pawns actively, either f2 to f3 and e2 to e4 to attack the black center. However, the idea of playing e2 to e4 is problematic, as we'll see. So instead of knight d3, let's say white had played bishop b2, then knight takes e5. Then d takes e5. Then bishop moves to c5. Looks sound enough for black. if knight takes e5 instead of d takes e5 here, if knight takes e5, then bishop takes e5, d takes e5, b6. Although black doesn't have his dark squared bishop, he has a strong center and is ready to develop his queen's bishop. Maybe to a6 to attack c4. This move is better for black than a previous line where he played bishop takes e5, d takes e5, knight takes e4. In this variation, black exchanges of two minor pieces instead of just one, which helps to relieve the cramped position, and black's move knight e4 is more useful than white's bishop to b2. So after knight d3, here black played b6 with the pressure temporarily on the c6 pawn. Ivanchuk takes the chance to develop his queen's bishop. Knight f to e5, all as planned. A new knight takes up precedence on e5 with a direct threat on c6. Bishop b7. The bishop is happy to defend c6, although it might seem odd to start the bishop's journey on a blocked diagonal. There might be opportunities later with the timely c6 to c5 move. At the least, the b7 bishop won't obstruct the rooks. Now knight takes d7. White swaps knights to prepare for advancing his pawns in the center. Queen takes d7. Now the black queen has been deflected from e7, where it helped the control of the c5 square. This becomes significant over the next two moves. Now white played f3. Finally, Shirov has the chance to use his pawns in a bid to gain more space. First of all, he drives back the enemy knight. Knight f6. The knight has to move back, but at least white's center has been weakened by his previous move. c5. An anti-bishop move. White stops black ever playing c6 to c5, which would activate his queen's bishop and liquidate the d4 pawn. And number 2 is aims to eliminate black's good dark squared bishop, either as in the game or after bishop c7. So here black played bishop b takes c5. Black is prepared to yield the bishop pair in return for getting rid of the hole on e5. If bishop c7, then bishop f4, then bishop takes f4, g takes f4, when his grip on the dark squares or outweighs any superficial damage to his king side. So b takes c5, and then white played knight takes c5, the consistent move as white has no compensation for black's superior center after d takes c5, then bishop c7, intending queen e7 and then e6 to e5. So after knight takes c5, black captured bishop takes c5. Naturally, the white knight couldn't be tolerated on c5 where it dominates the center. Then d takes c5 as needed, but the pawn has been moved away from d4 where it was useful for controlling the e5 square. However, trading black's supposedly strong bishop for his knight is a significant positional gain for white. Now black played e5. Now black not only has more pawns in the center, 4 against 3, but also has a space advantage because of his row of pawns on his 4th rank. Now white played a blunder. e4. A big mistake. White wanted to open lines for his two bishops and thought attacking the d5 was the way to do it, but this thinking was completely wrong and leads to a quick loss. Instead, white should have played more carefully with e3. Then maybe bishop b2 and f3 to f4 later, which would open a diagonal for the dark square bishop. Ivanchuk intended to cut across this plan with bishop a6, rook e1, and then d4. E takes d4, e takes d4, leading to balance chances. Although white's bishop pair is helpful in this position, black's passed pawn shouldn't be underestimated. Regardless of the outcome, white had to try this approach, as in the actual game he was completely stuck. So after e4, black played bishop a6. This bishop gets far more benefit from white's last move than the bishop on g2, rook e1. If instead rook f2, then f takes e4, f takes e4, knight takes e4, a good move. Then black is attacking the white rook on f2. Then rook takes f8 check, rook takes f8 idea, queen f5. If now bishop takes e4, that would be a blunder because rook f1 check gains a queen for a rook and bishop. So after bishop a6, now white played rook e1, moving the rook away from the attack. Then f takes e4. This capture wins both the f file for the black rooks and the g4 square for the knight. F takes e4. Opening the f file seems bad, but white cannot afford to lose a center pawn for nothing. Now black played another good move, d4. There go all white's hopes for counterplay. The protected passed pawn isn't just strong on its own, but it also blocks the white's pieces. Its menacing presence seems to freeze them in the face in the first place. So queen d2. White is no material down and there are no immediate tactical threats, but he is totally lost as he cannot contest the f file. Now black played knight g4. Ivanchuk has taken the lead after the maneuvering phase, but needs to attack aggressively to make the most of it. The f file is crucial. Every black piece must focus on it. The bishop controls f1. The knight aims for f2 to support an attack with rook f2. The rook on f8 already targets the f file. The queen's rook and queen will move towards f7 and f6 squares, and it will control the f file. So now white played bishop h3. He must prevent rook f2, which can now be answered with queen takes f2 because it's pinning the knight on g4. Now black played h5, another good move. It defends the knight and frees the queen to go out to go to the f file. So bishop a3. Shirov desperately tries to find an active role for this bishop, but Ivanchuk can't just ignore it. Queen f7. Controlling the f file with another piece, bishop b4. The bishop persists on its pointless journey, rook a e8. It's straightforward. The rook moves to the f file directly through e6. Bishop a5. The bishop on a6 and a5 are very different. White's bishop doesn't do much. It doesn't attack or slow down black's attack. It's almost like it's not even there. But black's bishop, despite being away from the main group, it's useful. It controls f1, stopping a white rook from using the f file and messing up white's defenses. Now black played rook e6. Now black threatens rook f6, rook f2, when white's king will be massacred on his second rank. Bishop f1. This leads to a quicker defeat. Knight f2, another good move, and then bishop takes a6. Black sacrificed the bishop. Now black played queen f3. The game ends quickly because there is no good way to stop black from delivering checkmate with either queen h1 or knight h3. The two white bishops sit impressively on the queen side but don't contribute to the game, showcasing a failed strategy. So that was the game. So some key principles and lessons learned from this game. Number 1, center control. Controlling the center of the board is crucial. Black's central pawn structure allowed for greater mobility and control. Piece activity. Actively involving all pieces in the game is essential. Black's pieces were well coordinated and contributed effectively to the attack, while White's bishops remained passive. Number 3 is pawn structure. Understanding the pawn structures and their implications is important. Black's solid pawn structure provided a foundation for their attack, while White's pawn structure was compromised, leading to weaknesses. Attack and defense. Number 4. Recognizing and responding to threats promptly is vital. White failed to defend against Black's aggressive play, leading to a rapid defeat. Number 5 is planning and flexibility. Having a clear plan is important, but it's also crucial to adapt to changing circumstances. White's rigid adherence to a flawed plan led to their downfall. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this video and learned something from this video as well. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video. Bye bye.